This is episode 581. Well, I met today's guest, Laura Gonzalez, at the 2021 Slow Flowers Summit, which took place in the San Francisco Bay Area at Filoli Historic House and Gardens. Laura lives nearby in a beautiful place that she calls Swallow's Secret Garden. Laura aspires to share the joy and the beauty of the flowers she grows with customers, friends, and neighbors in the Santa Cruz community that she lives in by growing a diverse collection of artisanal and seasonal flowers. She says, as the gardener in chief, I craft each arrangement exclusively from flowers and plants grown here on site. If you watched our award-winning Slow Flowers video that we released about 1 year ago, you will have heard Laura's voice as she spoke about the value of Slow Flower Society. She said, when I joined Slow Flowers, I felt like I had found the floral mothership. We're all just sharing and exchanging information and gathering a feeling of support that's incredible. I really appreciated that. I wanted to learn more about Laura's operation, about the origin of her business name, all about those swallows, and how she came to flowers. So I've got a 2-part episode for you today. First, you'll watch a short video that Laura has created to share her garden and all of the features of her garden and what she grows. It's about 15 minutes long. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A when Laura and I are in the studio just talking about all things flowers. I know you'll enjoy learning about this gardener-florist and her business model. So let's jump right in and get started. And I'll share our sponsor thank yous after the interview.
Hi, Slow Flowers community. This is Laura Gonzalez. Welcome to Swallow's Secret Garden in Scotts Valley, California. It's a beautiful sunny fall day here in our Zone 9B garden. After having about a week of pea soup fog, it's really great to be out and a good chance to be able to walk you around the garden. So here is some Gara that really likes to self-seed in my front yard and provides a wonderful food crop for the birds. If you can see all those seed heads that I've left standing on this Gara. I'm going to walk over here to one of my favorite spots in the garden, which is underneath the maton tree. So a maton tree, which is from South America, is a really, really drought-tolerant tree that has a beautiful canopy that reminds me a lot of a weeping willow. And so we've created this little seating area underneath the maton tree. I thought I would focus on 2 themes today as I walk you around the garden. As you might hear in the interview with Deborah, I'm an English major and I love a good theme. So I thought I'd talk today about conservation and inspiration. And under the maton tree is a good place to start because I chose this tree because it works really well in my situation. It's drought tolerant, but it's also super inspiring. I've always wanted a weeping willow tree, probably influenced by some beautiful botanical art in children's books that I read. And I found a way to have something that works in my landscape, but also I find really inspiring and beautiful. Part of what makes our property special is there are some at least a century-old oaks on the property. And so we've done our best to really conserve those oaks and make sure we have a good arborist to help take care of them. It's really wonderful to see here in California that even just a little bit of rain or fog, suddenly all of that wonderful moss on the oak appears. Also, because the property is entirely sloped, we're starting at the lowest point of the property, you're always kind of walking up. And one of the things I love about that is being able to see up to the canopy of the trees as you're going up. And here's an old Japanese maple that was here, and peeking behind it, you can kind of see where my rose garden is terraced up the hill. Up above the lower terrace is my rose garden, including a new section that I've been working on this year. So roses here do require a lot of supplemental water in the summer months. So I've set up a drip irrigation system, and I will also come through and give them a good watering with the hose as need be during the really hot weeks. And the way that I have balanced out the water needs in my garden is the majority of plants that I have as the backbone of the garden, particularly on the periphery, are native and drought-tolerant plants. This is a great plant to talk about in terms of both conservation and inspiration. So the common name for this plant is St. Catherine's lace, and it's a giant buckwheat that is native to California. And I love it because it's so happy here. This is an example of something that I got from a 4-inch pot, and now, has made different babies, and I've kind of spread it around. And I just have found so much inspiration for floral arrangements with this plant. So very often I will use these sage green rosettes at the bottom of an arrangement, and they really bring your eye to the bottom of the arrangement because they've got they reflect the light really well, and they're just really soft looking. So I could use those all year round at the bottom of an arrangement. And this plant is so happy in my environment that I'm not worried about pruning it back constantly. It just keeps going. And then we get these umbels of flowers, and they start out even more white than that, and then as the season goes on, they'll get kind of peachy, and then the ones you're seeing in the back are the ones that are pretty much done when they turn that brown color. So this is a great example of a plant that is a wonderful wildlife plant. There's constantly butterflies and other insects on this plant, and it's also just really inspirational for floral design. You can see the sage rosette of St. Catherine's lace in the peachy and plummy arrangement on the left, and you can see a very early stage of the umbels where they almost sparkle like jewels in the arrangement on the right. Another native plant that thrives here is the California coffeeberry. This one that I have is about 8 years old, and I prune it back pretty thoroughly. And this is another wonderful plant where I'm keeping it the right size for the garden, and I am able to use the foliage in arrangements. But in particular, I like to use these little stems in flower crowns and in corsages. As you can see, it's called coffeeberry because it has these really pretty berries that vary in color throughout the season. Here you can see coffeeberry used in a flower crown I recently created for a customer who wanted to emphasize the color red. I think the color of the berry is really complementary, and the size of the leaves is just about right. Two other native California plants that are great for pollinators and also inspiring for design work are Heuchera maxima and Kallima grandiflora. Heuchera maxima is a perennial that comes from the Channel Islands, and the spikes on the plant change from a creamy color to start and then go to a blush pink, and then they go into a deeper salmon color. And I find them really useful all through the season. Kallima grandiflora is an annual that I grew for the first time this year, and I'm looking forward to it self-seeding all over the garden because the particular color of the peach and the kind of bouncy ball shape of this giant phlox relative really add a really fun element to arrangements. Lastly, I wanted to mention some native and drought-tolerant shrubs that add some real drama to the garden when they're in bloom. So Garrya elliptica, also known as the silk tassel tree, is a California native. It's gotten really large. I think it's about 20 feet tall now in my garden. And when it is in bloom, it is absolutely spectacular. With these long tassels that it just makes me think of necklaces. As a matter of fact, sometimes I have people go stand there and pretend they're wearing necklaces. It's not particularly useful for an arrangement that you're going to send home with somebody to keep over the week, but for event design work, for an arrangement that's going to last for a day, they can be pretty spectacular. Ceanothus is a shrub that many people are familiar with. It's just such a wonderful ground cover for me. And when it's blooming, it's like nothing else. And also, once again, it sheds a lot, so not particularly useful for an arrangement, but it can be fun for event design. And then behind the ceanothus in the picture, you'll see that yellow haze, and that's an Azara dentata, which is very drought tolerant. It does need occasionally watering in the summer, but it smells like chocolate. It can make the entire garden from, 40 feet away smell like chocolate when it's in bloom. Once again, something that sheds, but if an event happens to line up with when it's in bloom, it's a wonderful thing to add. And everyone in the room is going to wonder where the chocolate is. On my website, I refer to Swallow's Secret Garden as a bio-exuberant borrowed ground. And I bought that bio-exuberance with the dense and diverse planting that I've done on this property that brings joy and sustains life for us and for our community, and most importantly, for the wildlife that lives here. We were aware from the beginning that this was a borrowed ground. Those century or more old oaks were here long before us. They'll be here long after us. And the swallows that nested on the corner of the house the first year we got here really showed us that they were here, that, they've probably been passing down for generations, that this is a safe place to come and raise their young. So as we were enjoying their acrobatics in the backyard and talking about what we needed to do for the property, we wanted to keep in mind that whatever we did, this was their home, and we were going to keep it a place that they would love and enjoy. It can be windy here, but I'm often surprised to see the amount of movement even when it's still, as the pollinators, birds, and occasional squirrels explore the garden. I'll talk later about the challenge of starting seeds outside in a wildlife-dense garden, but I've also learned to appreciate the amount of seeds that start themselves here, sometimes in inconvenient places like this Biden's in a bed where yellow wasn't the color theme, or this Borage alba growing in the path. I have noticed that the flowers that self-seed here often have the greatest value to pollinators. In an effort to protect wildlife, we use organic gardening practices, and we also keep water sources clean and circulating when possible. Pickles the garden cat has a bell on his collar to let the birds know when he's coming, and he also has an afternoon curfew to protect him from the occasional coyote or mountain lion that manages to scale our fences. Working with wildlife has inspired me to slow down and observe and be curious, rather than react when something is going on with the plants in the garden. I'm not thrilled when the aphids appear in the spring, but I've learned that the ladybugs are coming next. Of course, I'm still going to use the hose to spray the aphids off some of my prize roses. I grew Tweedia for the first time this year, and since it's a milkweed, I first thought the yellow eggs I discovered on the stem might be butterfly eggs. So before reacting, I researched, and when I discovered they were aphids, I could happily rinse them off. This is my seed starting shed. My family helped me get this about 10 years ago because everyone got tired of me making a mess in the guest room, starting seeds inside, and the neighbors wondering why there were grow lights shining through the windows for long periods of time. So I do start the majority of my plants, both annual and perennial, by seeds. I really enjoy the challenge of the different kinds of seeds. And I've kind of developed a system over time. So this is where I start seeds in the winter when I need the extra warmth, and I have, temperature regulated. I have 3 different zones that I can use. And I need to start all of my new varieties somewhere that is safe from the creatures that I have welcomed into my garden. So I really can't risk trying to start things directly in the ground because I have welcomed many, many different birds and insects, and even a population of lizards that can really just ravage my seedlings to the ground really quickly. So I start things in pots, and then I grow them onto the greenhouse, which I'll show you next. This is my unheated greenhouse where I will grow things on in the winter as it gets colder. The only thing I have going in here right now are just a couple little sweet pea starts, which looks like they're just starting to sprout. The biggest challenge I have to growing anything here is gophers. You can see where I grow my annual cut flowers, and everything goes into 4 by 8 foot semi-raised beds that are entirely lined with gopher wire. The picture on the left shows the 4 by 100 foot rolls of gopher wire that I buy to line the beds, and also to make gopher baskets for anything else that I'm going to plant in the garden. My floral business has brought me in connection with my community in really wonderful ways. I appreciate little fun moments, like when a customer shows up and her outfit is serendipitously color coordinated with her arrangement. Or the joy of seeing friends and neighbors outside at the flower cart while the pandemic was making everybody feel really isolated. And the bespoke bouquet orders over the last 2 years have connected me to losses in the community, with a good number of condolence bouquets, but also joys, like the bouquet on the right that a man ordered as a way to announce to his mom that she was going to be a grandmother. One particularly meaningful experience this past year was when some members of our local Ukrainian community asked me to come demonstrate and sell vinok at a fundraiser for Ukraine. Vinok are the traditional Ukrainian flower crowns. I just had a few weeks to prepare, but my friends rallied to help, and we were able to not only raise funds for humanitarian aid, but we also had the joy of learning and sharing a very important floral art that is central to Ukrainian culture. And Deborah, thank you for all you do to create a community of flower people where we can support and inspire each other.
Wow, that was a great tour, and I love the thoughtfulness that Laura brought to the presentation. As she said, she was an English major, so you can tell she's a great communicator. We're going to pivot now to the interview I did with Laura just a couple days ago. So let me go ahead and pop that video in, and I'll see you in a little bit. Well, hello, everybody. I'm so excited to continue this conversation with Laura Gonzalez of Swallow's Secret Garden. And we're going to just have our little Q&A now. How are you, Laura?
I'm doing really well. It's a nice foggy morning here, which I enjoy. So yeah, doing great.
Oh, yeah. And you're in your studio with all your dried flowers behind you. They're so, and fresh, it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I've been wanting to have you on the Slow Flowers podcast. I think people may hear your voice on the video we did last year, the membership video. And that was so fun because we actually met at Filoli at the Slow Flowers Summit in 2021. That's kind of in your backyard, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And very similar climate and growing conditions to where I am here.
So put Scotts Valley, California on the map and give us a snapshot of Swallow's Secret Garden.
Okay, I'll do that. So Scotts Valley is in the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and it is just over the hill from Silicon Valley, another valley that you would have heard of. Some people like to talk about it as sort of like an extension or a bedroom community for Silicon Valley. And we are technically we're zone 9B, but where I am, it's kind of a cold 9B sometimes. So I think I'm, more reliably like a 9A.
Mm-hmm.
And then our sunset zone, for those who are familiar with that, would be like a cold zone 15.
Okay. Because Sunset Magazine has kind of their own growing zones for the whole West, right?
Yeah, that are a little more specific and have a little more descriptive. Like I remember when I first looked that up, one of the descriptions was a punishing afternoon wind And that is definitely true in the summer. We'll get like a
Oh,
afternoon
oh
wind.
my gosh,
Yeah.
your poor little plants. That's crazy. Okay, but you are you're very coastal because
Um,
you're close to the Pacific coast, right?
yeah, so we'll get a strong marine influence. Of course, with climate change, everything is changing.
Yeah.
So, it used to be reliably, we would call it a June gloom, where it would be foggy during most of June. This year we had like fog and even some rain in May, and then June was kind of hot, and so everything seems to be changing a little bit.
Yeah.
And then where I am it really is in the foothills. It kind of looks like we're in a little bowl if you look around us, because there's, trees up behind us and trees in front of us. Um, you know, uh, it's oaks and redwoods and pines, and it's a sloped property. So I'm a little under 2 acres, which is great, but it's all sloped. So everywhere
Wow.
we want to have, it slopes up. So everywhere I want to have flat growing ground, I've had to terrace to make that
Wow.
happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we'll probably see that in the video as you share a little
Yeah.
walk around. But it's kind of just showing how intrepid you are that you've got this, afternoon winds and heat and I mean, it's just living in California. It's ever changing. But you live at your garden, right? I mean, this is your residential
Yeah.
space, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it really is a garden. We named it Swallow Secret Garden for the swallows that were here when we got here, and they're tree swallows. Like I mentioned, we're kind of in this bowl of trees.
Mhm.
And so, they were here first. And even when we ended up having to, almost take the house down to the studs when we moved in, we put up a pole where they had clearly been nesting on the corner of the house so that they could come. And then every year we're adding more little wooden bird houses around the house, like swallow houses. There's some other birds that have gotten in there too. The swallows have to compete now. And I'm kind of wondering when we're going to stop, because it's just so fun. You can hear them and then see the little fledglings coming out. So yeah, that's why it's named for the swallows. The secret part is because when we moved in, the lady who sold us the house, she did sell us the house. It was one of those competitive times, because I wrote about the garden.
Mm.
But in reality, she did not believe that you should ever cut a plant. Like, she kind of thought it hurt them. And so it was a little bit of a like haunted house vibe, and that there were trees kind of leaning on the roof and you had to crawl through things. There were stuff that we didn't even know was here, like this studio that I'm sitting in, which is a guest house. Before we made an offer on the house, we didn't even know this was here, because there was a wisteria that had like grown over the house. Um,
I always say if we don't tend our gardens if we take a year off, the garden's going to, take back the land and the house. And
oh yeah.
wisteria is one of those scary ones too, especially in California. I've seen them cross fences into other people's yards and keep going,
Oh,
right?
definitely. And really does not require any irrigation. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes.
Wow. The secret garden was the hidden garden that you then kind of created some order and brought back to life once I guess made the house habitable, right?
Right. Yes. And yeah, and props to my family for having faith. Particularly my husband, who was like, really?
Wait, how long have you lived there, Laura?
So I've been gardening here for 18
Okay.
years.
Okay.
My business is just 3 years old because it was a pandemic inspiration. But yeah, I've been creating the garden for about 18
Oh my
years.
goodness.
Yeah.
So had you gardened just for pleasure and for your own, sanity to create a beautiful space around your family residence? Is that sort of what the space was devoted to before your pandemic project?
Well, do you want to find out how plant crazy I am?
Yes, we do. We want to feel that we're not
Okay.
alone.
Yes. Yes, that was what was so fantastic about that Slow Flower Summit, I was like, I am not the only crazy person.
I remember
Yeah,
that you're
so
like,
I
I
think,
found my people.
yeah, I think I called it the mothership.
That was so
Yeah.
funny. Yeah.
Um, so I think I have always been obsessed with plants in the natural world. Like I have always been happiest when I was outside, looking up at the canopy of trees, playing in the dirt, any of that. I think when I was younger, I just didn't really know that horticulture was an option for me.
Mhm.
That was not anything anybody I knew did or talked about. I was a writer, and so all my teachers and everybody encouraged me to be an English major, which I loved. But I was always, and everywhere I went, I would find a garden that I could go to. That was where I always got my sense of peace and stuff. And so, yeah, the obsession just kind of grew and grew and grew. When my husband and I bought our first house, there was a rhododendron. I didn't really know what a rhododendron was. And I was like, this thing is so beautiful. How can something be so beautiful? And then we got a little help with the garden. And I was like, oh, there's all, a rose is not just a rose. I remember my first rose was a Graham Thomas.
Mm.
And then I got so obsessed with those David Austin roses. I've always had a connection with England, did a year abroad in England, just love English gardens. So, I just kind of, and then Annie's annuals happened.
People may not know what this like haven for plants is in the Bay Area, but I've been there a number of
Yes.
times and I get their catalog. So describe what that is for people who are in that same zone, right? You can grow everything that they sell.
Yeah.
That's scary
Yeah.
too.
Well, I mean, I may be causing plant problems for people because you can order from them. So yes, but so our local nursery, there's a nursery on River Street in Santa Cruz, has always had Annie's annuals.
Okay.
And what makes them special, I actually buy more. It says annuals, but you can buy perennials, and you can even buy little 4-inch pots that turn into, as I have in the yard, trees and shrubs. And
Annuals is just
so,
the first of her list.
yes.
Yeah.
And so what makes them different, and it was the first time I ever saw that, is, you can afford to buy a little 4-inch pot. And very often it's something that you just see leaves and it's not in bloom. But they were the first I saw that they have laminated cards that have pictures that show you what this plant can become and descriptions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I always find like the English major and the plant person, when they come together, that's when things can just go completely wacky, because
you're like seduced by the descriptions and the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I started really being like, I want to grow everything. Right. So, so that has been going on for a long time. That has been going on for over 30 years, where I have been like gradually becoming more and more I just fall in love with a plant, and I want to know everything about the plant. I want to know its backstory, its origin. I want to know what the plant explorers did with it. I want to know,
Oh, love it.
and so, and originally on this property, we were calling it Swallow Secret Farm because my first growing passion was really practical, edible things. So the property, it has an orchard. I have kind of one of everything, except I tried to grow a pawpaw and that didn't work.
Your children were at home then. You were probably trying to feed them what you grew, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big part of it. But I grew olive trees and I tried to make my own olive oil. That didn't go well.
Wow, that's hardcore.
I can cure olives. Yeah. And then I have a lavender hill, and I try to distill my own lavender oil. So,
like, how far can you push every one of these plants to its ultimate purpose?
exactly. Yeah.
So where did you live before you moved there? Were you in the Santa Cruz area also, just in a different house, or?
So I grew up, I lived in Saratoga till I was 10. and, lived there kind of at the beginning of the whole tech boom. So it was orchard land and everything like that.
Wow. Wow.
And we were in a new suburb there. And then when I was 10, this amazing thing happened where my family moved to this little town called San Martin that's sandwiched in between Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And I got into 4-H and I raised farm animals. It was a kind of a similar acreage. We moved from just a suburban lot to, I think it might have been my dad that maybe had the kind of
The farmer yearnings.
country.
Yeah.
He wanted more of a country place. Yeah. And he was obsessed with compost. Like he had this massive compost pile that was like his, went and coded for IBM during the day and came home and composted at night. So we were there. And then I went to school in Santa Barbara, which is of course another beautiful place.
Yes. Gardens galore.
Garden. Yeah. And then I did a year abroad in England that had like a huge influence on me. Came back, did a graduate program in San Francisco, and then met my husband in the Bay Area. And then we made the mature decision that whoever got a job near the beach first, that's where we would move.
I love it. That's so smart. It is a good decision.
Yeah. So we ended up in Santa Cruz County.
Okay. So this is, you gardened at another property. And then in the last 18 years, you've really like been all in at Swallow's Secret Garden, formerly Swallow's Secret Farm. Well, what triggered you sort of told us your path to plants, but what triggered your actual decision to become a cut flower grower and build out this as a I would say you're a gardener-florist, probably. Was that a fair way to describe it?
Oh, it's just interesting that you say that, because I have been thinking about this recently, that I say farmer florist because that's a term that people recognize, but I really do think I'm more of a gardener florist.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because you don't have like row crops or, something that would read as a farm, because it's your ornamental garden as well.
Yeah. And it was the ornamental garden that I just started adding more and more and more. And, I was frequently asked to make arrangements for, events to raise money for different charitable groups. I was, very often putting together things for friends, and I started getting more interested in floral design work. And then I actually did really get into growing more cut flowers. The zinnias and the dahlias were maybe like my gateway. And then I just kind of started getting into that, how I grow, because believe it or not, the slope and the afternoon wind and the tending towards sandy soil is not my biggest challenge. My biggest challenge is the gophers.
Wow. Wow.
So I do have a method that I use where I create these, they're raised beds that are not raised very high, but enough so that I can put gopher wire underneath those. And so all of my annual cut flower crops are, and that works on terraces too, because you can level out, they're like 4x8 beds, and I rotate my annual cut flowers through there.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like I talk to people who have above ground pests like deer, and then they've got their own infrastructure they've got to deal with. And then these underground pests can be just as damaging to the gophers can just come up and just ruin a whole bed, probably, snacking away at the roots. Is that what they're eating, is the roots?
Yeah, they, so the sandier the soil gets, as it goes up the property, the worse the gophers are, because it's just real easy for them to, kind of, they can make a huge mess.
Wow.
And sometimes it's the mess, not so much the roots. And of course, I did mention that my first and greatest obsession is the roses.
Yeah.
So I think I have about 70 different varieties of roses now. And I have learned over time. So when I first started planting them, I made a gopher cage that was kind of like this. And then I started making them like this. And now I make these like, really extensive gopher cages that I've learned I have to like even bend over the top toward, because they would sometimes burrow in there.
Okay. So they are coming from the top as well as the underneath. Wow. Oh,
Yeah,
my dear.
they'll do that.
The links that we go to. Well, while we're talking, I just pulled up your website. I'm going to put it on the screen so we can just I can ask you a little bit about your designs
Sure.
products, and let me see if I can find that really quickly. So this is your flower shop that you have, artisanal, seasonal, local flowers from our bio-exuberant borrowed ground. I've never heard that phrase before. I love it. That's the writer in you, Laura.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. So this is what, when people want to place an order, this is what they're coming to. They generally start here.
Yes, yeah. I have two kind of quick order buttons on my homepage, but yeah, this is the flower
Okay,
shop.
so who did the illustrations for you? These are so pretty.
So I actually purchased those off of a small artist on Etsy because
Oh,
I thought
wow.
they were really beautiful.
Oh, they
Yeah.
just they fit the personality of your garden inspired
Yes. Yeah.
designs, but also help people to see kind of what they're going to get depending
Right.
on the size. Yeah.
Yeah, because one thing that I do, so my design process has never really changed. You asked, how I moved into having a flower business from just being an obsessive gardener. And the process that I would use where I would create those arrangements for my friends or for events is really the same process I use right now, which is I just take a walk through the garden. I get as much information as I can about, so like for those bespoke bouquets, I get as much information. So that was a bouquet that was supposed to bring the peach one there was supposed to bring comfort to somebody who was recovering from a surgery.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I will, find out about, for the bespoke bouquets, I'll find out about the person and what the situation is as much as somebody wants to share. And then I will go look and if somebody has a color preference, I'll start there. And that they wanted like a soft yellows for that.
So like this one is a bespoke with the roses, and
Yeah.
because it's a much more kind of high like value added flowers in, as opposed to say the sunflowers and zinnias, right?
Right. Now, interestingly to me, because I don't use any outside flowers, it's only what I grow. It's either going to look beautiful on the rose bush or it's going to look beautiful in an arrangement. So the calculus is a little bit different for me. I think what I struggle with the most is not going too crazy and stuffing too much in the bouquet because, there's always
Yeah.
a to choose from.
You want to make a profit here. These are so beautiful. There's this is from your Instagram feed, right?
Yes, yeah.
I love it. Well, I just wanted to show that gallery a little bit, but people can come check you out and see a little bit more. But back to the ordering, the bespoke, you have a good description here. It's really a kind of a curated arrangement, whereas the small, medium, and large are kind of best of season, right?
Yeah. And that is I really do have two customer streams. So I have it's all local because I only deliver within a 5 mile driving radius for the delivery. And then everything else you see, those seasonal arrangements are all for pickup.
Okay.
So my two streams would be local people who want to order and they usually come pick something up. So that can just be, somebody wants an arrangement just to have an arrangement, or
they're going to a dinner party or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the bespoke bouquets, those are the only ones I have for delivery. And I would say my number one customer base is out of town people that want to order local flowers for somebody locally.
Sure, sure. And they're finding you because they're taking some intentionality. There's some intentionality to their search. They're not just going to a wire service or, a 1-800 something. I mean, they're really looking for local, seasonal, locally
Yeah.
grown. Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful.
And my international customers who want to order for somebody in northern Santa Cruz County, which is basically where we are, they're finding me through you.
Oh, great. Oh, that
Yeah.
makes me happy.
So I've had orders from England and Australia.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Yeah.
And Laura, I always hope that it's through Slow Flowers, but I can't compete with Google as a search engine. So, I realize that uh, people who are growing like you are, you need to be, found through all kinds of, search
Right.
tools because you're competing with these multi-billion dollar flower companies that can buy up all the keywords. So I love knowing that some of these customers are coming from abroad. That's wonderful. Can I
Yeah.
click on the Flower Club and can you talk a little bit about that before we kind of wrap things up?
Sure.
Okay, so what is the Flower Club?
So the Flower Club is something that I started. Uh, if you look at, let's see, if you go to the sign up, you can probably see.
Oh, a little
Hopefully,
bit more about it. Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah, so that's something that I started to just encourage local customers to, you know, give me repeat business and for me to be able to serve them better. And so it just, gives them a discount on some of the flowers. But more
Oh,
importantly, it puts them first on the list when I do certain events.
mm-hmm.
So one of the other things that I do that this past year I really haven't been able to do as much as I would have liked because we had, some family events and things that
Mm-hmm.
were taking me out of town. But I do have occasionally I'll have a flower cart. So I will, when I'm, have a big flush of blooms, I'll put together an event and I will advertise it. And I tend to send those advertisements first to the flower club members so that they know and they'll have priority, especially also if I'm having something that is like a one and done, like my lilacs. I'll let them,
Mm.
hey, the lilacs are blooming.
So it's
uh
almost like a pop-up sale, but they're the first to find out about it, the people in
yes.
the club.
Yeah.
I just wanted to click over to the swallows and we'll talk about this in the video, but I will share the link in our show notes at slowflowerspodcast.com so people can see more about these swallows and the story of the garden. So, of course, the fact that you are such a comfortable writer, I now it all falls into place for me that you're
Yeah.
writing the story of your garden and you're communicating with your customers that way. Wow. So on the
Yeah.
swallows, Laura, what is it? Are they sort of a local phenomenon or like I'm picturing like these the sky filled with birds all flying in kind of in tandem. Is that what they're like?
Sometimes that happens. Yeah, they're tree swallows. And because we're, you can see in those pictures, we're surrounded by these trees. There's actually like a little pond across from us. And, we have some birds there too. But yeah, they just sometimes in the summer, you look up in the sky and I mean, they're just dipping and diving and doing their acrobatics. And there's just this one corner of the house where they've always come. They say that birds pass on that information through generations about like a
Wow.
safe place where they can come.
Wow.
And I do, this is a wildlife refuge, really, truly. And I do try to, I use all organic methods. And there's certain things that I grew thinking that they would be great in arrangements. And they have turned out to be like kind of fussy or wilty or whatever, but I can't get rid of them because the birds
Yeah.
just like I've got a Gara in the front yard and it will take over. I do have to cut it back, but it's get long stems. And there's these little finches that look like they're on pogo sticks, the way that they love to eat those seeds. And so I'm
Cute.
just like, okay, that's staying.
That's my gift to
But
nature. Yeah. I
yeah.
love that. I assumed that if you had this bird habitat that you were going to you're gardening without any kind of synthetic additives or chemicals because you're so conscious and concerned about these beautiful creatures that kind of define the
Yeah.
name of your brand.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
And
it.
you asked me about deer, and one of the benefits of moving here is it was already all fenced in. So we
Yeah.
don't, we do, though, occasionally, my neighbors have called me and said, "Hey, do you know there's a mountain lion taking a sun bath in your back?" And we had a raging battle with coyotes about 2 years ago after the CZU fire,
Mhm.
which was here. We evacuated from that fire.
Wow.
Um, and after that, some things in the habitat definitely changed. And we had these two coyotes that were just, it was like a game, they kept finding ways in and we kept trying to block them out. And, but we're very welcoming of all smaller wildlife,
Right.
except
Oh my gosh. As long as they don't bother the flowers, you're probably very welcoming. Oh, this has been so much fun. I'm so excited that we're gonna have the video to combine this with, and then I think I'll ask you for some of the arrangements, photos of your arrangements that we showed on the
sure,
screen, so we can
absolutely.
sort of put a little gallery together for our show notes. Laura, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got to spend this
Absolutely.
time together.
It's always wonderful to be around people that just are as weird about plants as I am. So,
Good. Well, you're in the right group. All right. Thank you so much.
absolutely. Thank
Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. That was a lot of fun. You'll want to visit slowflowerspodcast.com to watch the replay video of today's conversation. Look for episode 581. I'll also share links to Swallow's Secret Gardens social places so you can follow along with Laura on her journey. Before I go, I'd also like to thank our sponsors who bring this show to you. This show is brought to you by slowflowers.com, the free online directory to more than 850 florists, shops, and studios who design with local, seasonal, and sustainable flowers, and to the farms that grow those blooms. It's the conscious choice for buying and sending flowers. And thank you to our lead sponsor, Farm Girl Flowers. Farm Girl Flowers delivers iconic burlap wrap bouquets and lush, abundant arrangements to customers across the U.S., supporting U.S. flower farms by purchasing more than $10 million of U.S. grown, fresh, and seasonal flowers and foliage annually. Discover more at farmgrowflowers.com. And thanks to Store It Cold, creators of the revolutionary CoolBot, a popular solution for flower farmers, studio florists, and farmer florists. Save thousands when you build your own walk-in cooler with the CoolBot system and an air conditioner. If you don't have time to build your own, they also have turnkey units available. Learn more at storeitcold.com. Thank you to the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. Formed in 1988, ASCFG was created to educate, unite, and support commercial cut flower growers. Its mission is to help growers produce high quality floral material and to foster and promote the local availability of that product. You can learn more at ascfg.org. And thank you to Red Twig Farms. Based in Johnstown, Ohio, Red Twig Farms is a family owned farm specializing in peonies, daffodils, tulips, and branches, a popular peony bouquet by mail program, and their Spread the Hope campaign, where customers purchase 10 tulip stems for essential workers and others in their community. Learn more at redtwigfarms.com. The Slow Flower Show is a member supported endeavor, and I value our loyal members and supporters. If you're new to our weekly show or our long running podcast, check out all of our resources at slowflowersociety.com. The link is in our profile, and consider making a donation to sustain Slow Flower's ongoing advocacy, education, and outreach activities. You can find the donate button in the column to the right at slowflowerspodcast.com. I'm Deborah Prinzing, host and producer of The Slow Flower Show and the Slow Flowers podcast. Next week, you're invited to join me in putting more slow flowers on the table, one stem, one vase at a time. The content and opinions expressed here are either mine alone or those of my guests alone, independent of any podcast sponsor or other person, company, or organization. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll see you next week.